So we've looked at the problem, low growth and high inertia. We've looked at the promise, the possibility of increasing our innovation throughput by 50%, our profitability. Next, we want to look at what is the philosophy. So what are the pieces of the philosophy? There are all sorts of books on this, of course. There are hundreds of books, and we've read many of them, right? We have the great book by Jim Collins. We have books by Jack Welch. We have the book by Eliyahu Goldratt. We have Traction by Wickman. We have hundreds of these sorts of books, and each of them has a little bit different angle. And the question starts to become, which book do I listen to? And the philosophy that I want to show next looks at all of these in a somewhat coherent way. First, what is the common way right now that we do innovation? We do stage gate. Every company uses stage gate in one form or another. There are a few challenges with it. So the idea is that we start with the R&D team, we have a gate, they throw it over the wall, and who picks it up next? Maybe legal. Legal throws it over the wall. Who picks it up next? Maybe regulatory. They throw it over the wall. Who picks it up next? Manufacturing, throw it over the wall. Maybe marketing. These orders might change, and there might be some mixing among these. But stage gate has a few inherent challenges. Number one, it's inherently serial. Even though it doesn't necessarily have to be, it almost always is. And so these start to become silos. There are a couple problems with that. One is that these silos are slow. An even worse problem of the serial nature, however, is that it assumes that all information that was needed was known in a previous stage. So manufacturing is assuming that regulatory knew everything they needed when they looked at it, and regulatory is assuming that legal knew everything they needed when they looked at it, and legal is assuming R&D knew everything they needed when they looked at it. It's very seldom true. And so what ends up happening many times is you get down to the regulatory or manufacturing stage, and you find out that, wait, R&D didn't know about that, and so you have to throw it all the way back to the beginning, across silos. There are other problems with these. One is the silos are often not well prioritized. It's who can make it to the gate first. And so rather than strategically looking over the entire portfolio of the projects, we say, well, who's next? And we bring them in, beat them up, put them through the gate perhaps even. But the inherent prioritization is not it's not prioritized, not strategized across all pieces. So that can be a real problem. Third, the stage gate process is inherently evaluative. It evaluates every step along the way. It's not generative or creative. These are things that seldom appear. The legal team seldom adds anything to what the R&D team is doing. The manufacturing team seldom adds anything to what the R&D team is doing. But if all these were integrated, then manufacturing could speak directly to R&D and say, that's going to be a very difficult material to process. So that's a really challenging way to build that or to make that. Marketing could say, well, I'm not sure that's going to be valuable for the customer. Regulatory could say, hey, that material's been banned in Europe for a couple of years now, or will be soon, maybe in a couple of years. So those are generative pieces when they can crosstalk amongst each other. Right now, it's primarily evaluative. And the fourth thing is stage gate is inherently inventorial, meaning that things go through this process. Very frequently, they have to come back to the beginning. And so you have research that has been done, you have legal work that has been done, but it's sitting in inventory. It's not leading directly to an innovation that can be sold. And so this inventory or recycle starts to grow. And it's expensive because it's stuff you spent money on, but you're not gaining any return on it. And that's a real problem. So we'd like to be able to overcome these. And the first thing is, so I'll erase the stage gate piece. The first thing is to recognize that what are we actually trying to innovate? What are the pieces we need to build? We oftentimes think, well, find out what the customer wants and then you just make it. But I think we have to be a little more discerning on this. We have to be a little more precise on what it is that we're trying to manufacture here. And one of the first things that I think we need to figure out is, what is the future voice of the customer? How many times I've spoken with representatives and they've said, well, of course we start with the customer. We find out what they want and we make it. But we're not necessarily interested just in the voice of the customer, because in many cases, they don't even know what they want, or more especially, what they need. What we want is the future voice of the customer. We want to know what they will need 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And we have to iterate toward that. We can't simply, nobody hands you a brief and says, hey, here's what they're going to want in 7 years. It doesn't exist. So we need to build that future voice of the customer. The second thing we're going to need is an integrated innovation team. This is what we talked about with the stage gate. It's not enough to have all these silos that go through one at a time. We need the integrated innovation team where all these people are together simultaneously, including the sustainability people, including the VP leaders, including the finance people. All of them need to be together so that the ideas can flow back and forth, and there could be one surge for this product moving out. And then finally, we need the ideas that are going to push this through. And by the ideas, it's not just the new ideas. We need to know what are the valuable questions that have to be answered in order to get to that future voice of the customer. We need to know what are the barriers. We need to know what are the multiple hypotheses for the questions. And this is where a lot of the creative work happens. Asking the right questions and posing multiple hypotheses that can be determined rapidly. The testing can determine whether something's incorrect rapidly. This is a major gain in speed in the research process, if we can do this. And this just loops around. So we hypothesize a future voice of the customer. The integrated innovation team examines it from a number of perspectives, comes up with a number of reasons, questions that pose risks, that identify risks, hypotheses for what to answer those questions. We test it, and we update the future voice of the customer based on this. Maybe there's some things we found out, hey, we can actually do this, and it enhances this. Or maybe some feature that we didn't realize that would be so difficult, we say, well, is that really that valuable? We just keep going around. As you change the future voice of the customer, you might need to add or subtract somebody from your team who might, again, change what questions you ask or what hypotheses you pose. So this triangle is how we're going to manufacture innovation. And again, we need enough throughput here, so we have to be able to do this fast enough so that we can keep going. So the next piece is, this is the process manufacturing of innovation. How are we going to do this? What are the pieces that go into process manufacturing? So I'm going to erase this now, but we'll keep these in mind: the future voice of the customer, the integrated innovation team, the questions, the hypotheses.